And we are on again. Hi. Take two for today. I need a little checklist for getting things right in the beginning of these things. Um, let's go and have a look. First, can you see my mouse? I can see my mouse. That's great. Okay, so that bug is done. I'm publishing actually to the right feed this time, and I'm actually looking at myself at the moment, and now I'm switching over to the desktop, and we're gonna get started with today's cast. Okay, so this was yesterday's cast, right? We looked at tracing this simple line. Today we are going to trace multiple at the same time, and we're going to throw in a curve. How do you fit a curve? Okay, so let's just go back to our flow file. We are going to create a new timeline just by clicking that button. The first one we can call some single, and this one we're going to call many. And if I recall from yesterday, our scene size was 800 by 400. We're going to make it the same as today. I'm going to press Command 1 to center everything into the center of the screen or center of the stage. I can move this over to the side a little bit to give myself a little bit more space. And now I'm going to press Command I. It's going to import an image for me. This is the one we just looked at on my desktop. And there we go. This one looks a little bit big. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lock the proportions over here on the right. And then I'm just going to change the width to 800. That's going to make it 800 by 400. And I'm going to go back. I just clicked on the single timeline. Now I'm selecting the dot. I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste it right in here. Then I'm going to turn on relative mode. I think maybe I created an animation for that image because I hadn't had relative mode on when I was changing its size. So let's just delete that by selecting the key values. And now I'm going to put the dot in, dot, 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 something like that. Just copy and paste them in there by pressing Option and dragging. Whoops. Let's get rid of that. And we're going to go like this. Again, that was on. Instead of using the icon today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and I'm going to lock that image out so that we can't see it. I don't like these copy names, so I'm going to call it dot 0, dot 1, enter, press up, dot 2, enter, press up, press enter, dot 3, enter, like that. Okay, and then we're going to do the technique that we looked at yesterday. Okay, we're going to start by generating the last key value. Okay, first we're going to turn off relative mode. Now we're going to move this. We're going to generate, we're going to undo, obviously, and move the playhead to the end of the timeline. Move to here, and we're going to make them all 200 because we remember that also yesterday from the yesterday's flowcast, because the height is 400, so the middle point is 200. And now we have this motion right here. Okay. Next thing we're going to do, we are going to select all of the key values for the beginning of the X animations, which is the horizontal animation. Then we're going to press this button. So do you see what that does? Is when you have a key value selected, multiple key values selected, you hit that little button up here and it selects all of the easing curves that are to the right of those values. So I can select multiple at the same time and I can make them all linear like that. Now, if you remember the principle yesterday, what we're supposed to do now is we're supposed to go and look at the path that these are all supposed to take. And there's actually a couple of different paths, but they're all fairly similar. But we find the inflection points. And from the inflection points, that's where we create key values for whatever layers we need to create. Okay? Or for whatever layers need to be animating. So we're back on the desktop. Okay? And we are going to move backwards to this point in time right here. oops, undo. We want to move backwards with the timeline playhead to right there, right about there. And that's where the first inflection point is, or the last, whatever you want to call it. It's the last one in the timeline, the first one that we're doing, and it's the inflection point for the circle. It's where the circle ends and then goes back to moving horizontally. So, you know, it's also just an inflection point in the Y value, where the Y value stops changing, or the vertical value of the shapes stop changing. We can move backwards a little bit, just to right about there. And here is where we need to make a couple of key value changes. So when we talk about inflection points, there's no like hard corner on a circle, right? But where a circle changes is it changes in two directions. It changes in the vertical direction and it changes in the horizontal direction. Here it's changing in the vertical direction. So it's going up and coming down. So that inflection point is where that changes, where the vertical motion changes. So right at the peak of the circle, that's also what we call an inflection point. So I'm going to move, let's say, dots 0 and 2. We're going to move them both up like that. Oh, that's dot 3. Let's take dot 2, should be here. Let's move that down. Let's then take dot 1 and 3 and align them both together. And 1 and 2, and up here in the right again, we're going to bottom align those so that they are aligned. And now we have something like that. And it appears that for a couple of them, we created X track key values, and we just want to select those two, this and this. And you know, I noticed that when I started animating and they weren't fully aligned at this point, they should all be still aligned. And so we're just going to delete those. That's all we did. I pressed the delete button while they were selected. Okay, so now we have that. Here is about our inflection point where the circle begins. Maybe it's like one more point in time over, and all of those should be at 200. 200, right back in the middle. So I'm changing the property value manually right there, and we look pretty good to go. So right here is an inflection point, but which ones? It's not an inflection point for all of them. It's an inflection point for the one that's from here and here. So that's 0 and 3. So I can select 0 and 3, and I can go and I can make those 200 over here in the properties panel. And then I come back to this point in time right here. And this is an inflection for 1 and 2. And I'll do the same thing. Make it 200. And then right back here, we have inflection points for all of them. That's where the Y values start. And the time here is 0.18. And this is important, actually. I can copy this value right here down in the top right of the timeline. You can see what current time you're at. And I'm going to go and select the first value of each of those Y values. Because why? Literally, why? We haven't changed the horizontal position here. So the time at the beginning of the animation should be exactly identical to this point in time. And there's two ways that I could do this. I could go and I could say that the start of this selection, which is like the 4 points selected, is 0.18. And now they're all in position. Okay. Or I could undo that, and I can also drag this animation out like that. And you see, just as you bring that key value right to the point in time, they all start to align. Okay. So now we should see something like that. And maybe this one is a little bit too late. But let's also look at, let's look at, just look at the timing now. The timing and the motion. I actually want to do this to begin with. I think these, since they're all linear times, they should all be linear easing curves. So I selected all of those key values. I clicked this little button right up here, brought that up, and it selected each one of those easing curves right there, and then I hit linear. And so now that looks about right. Now this is an interesting part of our timeline. I'm just using the mouse to scroll over a little bit. Let's zoom in a little bit more so we can see right in here. And now let's go into our animation like that. Oops. What we can see is that these shapes do not follow the arc of the curve. So the way that you figure out how to get it to fit to the arc of a curve, and here this one is a circular one, so we want something that's relatively symmetrical. So something like cubic is not, because it starts really quickly. Watch this. I'm just going to change this one, and it's going to go up. It's going to go up super fast and come down. And so it's like, it's kind of close, but it's not quite there. Something that's a little bit more symmetric is probably cubic, maybe even quad. And I don't particularly like the quad, so let's make it cubic like that, because it is actually like just boom, an immediate jump up. And what I'm looking at is I'm looking at this dot right here, and it looks to me like that fits fairly well. And so now what I can do is I know that those key values should all be like this. They should all be cubics. I'm going to click on them, and they're going to make them all cubic out like this. And now there we go. They all look like they're hitting that properly. You know, these could probably all come back by like 0.1 of a second, 0.01 of a second. Yeah, that looks good to me. And which means that all of these ones here should be cubic in. They should be the opposite of that. And there we go. And okay, that should be an even number. The duration is 0.15. Since everything is symmetric, this should be out just by 0.1, and that looks good to me. Okay, so let's slow down our animation is fairly slow. There we go. Done. So the nice thing about something like this is when you have all your animations done and in place, what you can do is you can just offset them a little bit. Let's make them offset by a half a second, or half of a tenth of a second each, 0.05. I'm just selecting everything and then shift selecting to grab the next versions. And there we go. So now we have something like this. Okay. And we're done. Okay, great. So we looked at tracing again today. What we looked at we built on yesterday by looking at how to trace multiple objects at the same time. And then we also looked at how to trace over a curve. Now this is a very simple curve, but it still shows the principle of finding the inflection points where the change in direction happens for either X or for Y. Here it was for the Y value, or the vertical value. And we applied some easing curves to it. We picked one, it didn't really feel right. We picked a second one, it was kind of close. We picked a third one, that felt right. And then we modified all of our animations to use that curve. And then we offset all the animations so that we could see them all at the same time. Okay, simple stuff. Tomorrow, we have a little trick where if you actually have the shape and you're actually using you're not using just an image. If you actually have the shape and you have an aesthetic like a dot, I'm going to show you how you can use a path to create this kind of motion yourself. And then we'll discuss the differences between the two techniques. Okay, talk to you tomorrow. Bye.